Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Alberta government announces it's open for summer plan. We will explain what that will look like. BC Premier John Horgan announces what steps his province is taking to reopen. And millions around the world were able to see the spectacular blood moon on Tuesday night. We will explain how this rare phenomenon occurs.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney announced his open for summer plan for our province today. He says Alberta should be fully reopened by the first part of July. Kenney says it will involve 3 stages and is contingent on case counts continually coming down and more Albertans being vaccinated against COVID-19. Kenney says as long as hospitalization rates are 800 or lower and 50% of Albertans have been vaccinated, we can move on to stage 1 of reopening. That will include places of worship going back to 15% capacity as of Friday. As of June 1st, retail capacity will also increase to 15%. Hair salons and wellness services will be by appointment only. Outdoor recreational activities can increase to 10 people, and outdoor patios can reopen to 4 people per table. Kenney says by mid-June, they're hoping to launch stage 2 as long as 60% of Albertans have had their COVID-19 vaccine shot and less than 500 people are in hospital with the virus.
Stage 2 will be a big step forward. Libraries and movie theaters will reopen. Albertans can return to the gym and large public outdoor gatherings can resume. Places of worship and retail will see higher capacity limits, going up to 1/3 of occupancy at that point. Restaurants will be able to welcome groups of up to 6, both indoors and outdoors, and the work from home order will be lifted with sports, performance, and recreation activities all resuming. Now, some restrictions will be in place to continue keeping numbers down, driving them down further, so that we can then safely open up altogether.
Kenney says he's hopeful that by July, the province can move on to stage 3, which would lift almost all restrictions except for the mandatory quarantine period for those who test positive for COVID-19. Lethbridge Mayor Chris SPEARMAN reacted to the province's open for summer plans and how they will impact our city moving forward.
I don't anticipate that we would change anything for Canada Day. That takes a lot of planning. And, things are just not in place at the moment. Canada Day is basically 4 weeks away, 4.5 weeks. So we couldn't possibly organize entertainment, organize fireworks, do those types of things in that short a period of time. So I'll have to, but I imagine over the next few weeks, as the numbers change, that we will begin reviewing what may or may not occur.
Moms Stop the Harm is a national advocacy group to support those struggling with addiction and to support families who've lost a loved one to an overdose. The group advocates for harm reduction sites like the supervised consumption site that was once in Lethbridge, but later closed once the province pulled the plug for funding for the site. Lethbridge Representative Lori Hatfield presented to Lethbridge City Council's Community Safety Standing Policy Committee on behalf of the group. She says their goal is to have the overdose crisis declared a national public emergency and to decriminalize certain drug possession.
It would take away this revolving door we have of people having drugs on them, being arrested, being put into jail, and then they serve their time for the amount, because it's just a small amount for personal use that they have on them. They get released from jail, and then it just happens over and over and over again. We are getting nowhere with this law and these policies. It's not fair that we decide which drug and which substance is okay to use and which one isn't. First and foremost, we need to have a supervised consumption site here. Dead people don't recover, and we need to be able to keep people alive in order for them to be able to access a treatment that works for them. So that is the first order of business here.
The group's resolution to the committee also asks municipalities to work with provinces to develop a comprehensive pan-Canadian plan for ending the overdose crisis. May marks Lyme Disease Awareness Month. Ticks burrow their way into the skin of humans and animals, causing harm. A Lyme disease specialist says she wants to educate the public about ways they can protect themselves from ticks this summer. As Micah Quinn explains, she's speaking from personal experience after being bitten herself.
Sarah Cormode says she found a tick on the back of her head almost 10 years ago, and within a few weeks, she started becoming sick.
And for me, it started with really severe headaches that actually lasted for years, every day for years, and light sensitivity. And then eventually I had neurological complications. So I was having a hard time putting words into sentences and even just doing those automatic things like putting your car into park. And I was really aware that my brain wasn't functioning, but I didn't know what was wrong with me.
Lyme disease is caused by a bacteria called Borrelia, and Cormode says it's important to check for ticks if you're outside.
Places like your head produce a lot of heat. A tick would love to hang out there for some time and feed on you. Other places are your groin, the back of your knees, your armpits. And somebody even found one in their eyebrow. So it's just good to do a quick check of your whole body. And the other thing is just to be mindful of how you move through when you're in the outdoors. If you're on a trail, it's good not to be brushing up against the long grass that's coming over the trail.
The Canadian Lyme Disease Foundation provides tick removal kits just in case you encounter a tick or get bitten.
And you want to follow those instructions and remove it from the mouth part. You never want to squeeze the tick because that's going to increase chance of transmission.
Cormode says you can ship off ticks to a private lab called Genetics that will take the tick apart and see what pathogens it might be carrying. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Virtual reality has become a big factor in business success in our city. Lethbridge College's Emerging Realities event will focus on ways that virtual reality has helped out business owners in our cities, including areas like agriculture and architecture. Digital communications and media instructor at the college, Chris Hodgson-Bright, says if any businesses are interested in working with the college, they should contact the Applied Research Department.
There is a whole team that can assess the goal that you'd like to achieve and then really work out some kind of plan where we can even multi-phase it and look at different grants and funding opportunities, or perhaps if the funds are already available, to see the kind of in-house capacity with students graduating from the VR program every year, as well as the architectural animation program every year. There's a lot of great specialty and expertise where hopefully, based on what you're wanting to achieve with the business, there can be a really nice mesh and a really nice matching of talents.
The virtual event starts on June the 8th. The province is revving up its Turn Off the Taps legislation. The law, which expired earlier this month, was to be used as a last resort to restrict oil and gas to British Columbia. It stemmed from a dispute with BC, which was reluctant in allowing construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. BC has given in, but Alberta Environment Minister Jason Nixon says it is prudent to have such legislation in case others seek to limit our province's ability to develop its resources. The original legislation was crafted by the former NDP government and proclaimed as the first act of Premier Jason Kenney's UCP government in April of 2019. The Alberta RCMP released their numbers as to how many impaired drivers were caught during the Victoria Day long weekend. Police say they removed 121 motorists who were under the influence of drugs or alcohol. 61 motorists received immediate roadside sanction fails and 25 received warnings. There were also 23 license suspensions and vehicle seizures. That included an impaired driver who was traveling the wrong way on the Trans-Canada Highway near Brooks. A four-step plan in BC to lift restrictions could mean live entertainment, meeting friends for dinner, and making mask wearing optional by September the 7th. Premier John Horgan says the province's strong immunization rate allows it to slowly bring people back together with a target date for the final phase of the plan to be implemented after Labor Day. So what does all of this mean?
It means you'll be able to enjoy a meal in a restaurant with some friends. It means you'll be able to have more guests over to your home or have a barbecue tonight in your backyard. It means that travel within your regions will be okay, but we want to stay in those three key regions, the island, the rest of British Columbia, and the lower mainland. The observations to stay local have been lifted, but the restrictions on travel have not.
Horgan says his province also now allows indoor and outdoor dining for up to 6 people, indoor gatherings with 5 personal visitors, and in-person faith-based gatherings at reduced capacity. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is urging more people to get the COVID-19 vaccine as his province gets ready to begin easing restrictions on Sunday. Officials announced that they will be relaxing restrictions on outdoor sports during the first step of reopening. It comes 3 weeks after 70% of the province's residents, age 40 or older, received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Saskatchewan is now set to accept intensive care patients from Manitoba, where hospitals have been overwhelmed with COVID-19 cases. Officials with the Saskatchewan Health Authority say Manitoba patients may be sent to intensive care units outside of Saskatoon or Regina. 18 intensive care patients from Manitoba have already been sent to hospitals in several Ontario cities over the past couple of weeks to try and free up beds. The latest data shows over 20 million Canadians have now had at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Ontario put more than 135,000 jabs into arms on Wednesday, pushing the country's total past 20 million. Dr. Theresa Tam says Canada is now around 12% shy of the threshold that she put in place as a safe time to begin lifting restrictions on many outdoor activities. Tam says she would like to see 75% of Canadians fully vaccinated before more restrictions are completely lifted. A story we recently covered on Bridge City News is how the federal government shut down the opportunity for Canadians to cross the border into Montana at the Carway border crossing to get their COVID-19 vaccine shots. Well, according to political reporter Brian Lilley, the Trudeau Liberals also shut down a similar opportunity for Canadians to get vaccinated at the Windsor-Detroit border.
The owner of the Ambassador Bridge, it's a privately owned bridge, said, you bring people over and you can do it in the parking lot of my duty-free, which is closed right now because nobody can stop, and they haven't entered the U.S. and they can go back. Public Health Agency and Canada Border Services still said, no, they'll have to quarantine for 2 weeks. They're shutting down every opportunity at communities like this across the country. And the best that anyone can come up with is it would make the Trudeau government look bad if they had to start taking doses from the United States and getting Canadians vaccinated down there.
Mr. Lilley will also have the latest on the Liberals' Bill C-10 and how it will impact your social media life. That interview is coming up in the second half of our newscast. For our online poll question this week, we are now more than a year into the pandemic. With what political party do your loyalties lie? If an election was held today, whom would you vote for? Let us know your thoughts by logging onto our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and we'll tabulate the results and have them for you on Friday evening's newscast. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says his party will support a Bloc Québécois motion that says it would be irresponsible to hold a federal election until the pandemic is over. Singh says the Liberals would only provoke an election if they want more power.
It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that we are going to support this motion from the Blocs to clearly state there should not be an election in a pandemic. Also, something that you would think wouldn't need to be stated, but at the point we're at right now with at the federal level, with the cases increasing and the crisis narrowly averted in Ontario, we were at a pretty desperate point at one point in Ontario not too long ago. With cases increasing in Manitoba, in Newfoundland and Labrador, where they've, in Manitoba, had to send people to Ontario, things are really bad. And the idea that the Liberal government would rather call an election, the only reason they would do this is because they want to seek power, and they're not making a decision in the interest of people.
South of the border, a firefighting helicopter carrying 4 people crashed late Tuesday near a Central Florida airport, killing at least 1 person. Crews were still hopeful of finding survivors in a wooded, swampy area.
Fire on scene responded to the crash site, as did some of our patrol officers that were in the area. It became immediately evident that the aircraft had crashed into a pretty heavily wooded and swampy area, so it was difficult to get back to where the main crash site was. It appears that a Black Hawk helicopter was flying training maneuvers in the immediate area of the airport. At some point, some kind of a mechanical failure evidently occurred, and the helicopter went into a tailspin. At some point, the tail separated from the main body of the aircraft. The tail went onto the airport runway area, and the main body of the aircraft went back into that swampy, wooded area.
The family of George Floyd met with U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House on Tuesday to mark the 1-year anniversary of Floyd's death at the hands of a police officer. The family's in Washington, urging the passage of a police reform bill.
We met with the president and the VP. It was just for the remembrance of what happened to my brother, because this was his day that he was murdered. It was great. He's a genuine guy. They always speak from the heart, and it's a pleasure just to be able to have the chance to meet with him when we have that opportunity too. We're just thankful for what's going on, and we just want this George Floyd Policing Act to be passed in the future. This is the thing. If you can make federal laws to protect the bird, which is the bald eagle, you can make federal laws to protect people of color.
People all around the world stayed up late last night to watch a special cosmic event called a super blood moon. The striking display was the result of two simultaneous events: a supermoon, which is when the moon lines up closer than usual to the Earth and appears bigger than usual. Now you combine that with a total lunar eclipse, or a blood moon. That's when the moon sits directly in the Earth's shadow and is struck by light filtered through the Earth's atmosphere. The total eclipse was relatively short, lasting only around 14 minutes. Now the best part was that you didn't even need a telescope to see it if you had a clear sky. Too bad it was so cloudy here in southwestern Alberta. It would have been so nice to see the blood moon. Now it was great, however, to see the sunshine today along with warmer temperatures, and the warm weather will be sticking around for the rest of the week. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. Not a lot of wind and lots of sunshine in Lethbridge today. It was a great day for a walk down by the Oldman River or maybe at Henderson Lake. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, a lot of the rain clouds have moved on, so we should be seeing more blue sky and sunshine this week.
Yeah, it looks like those rain showers and that possibility of a thunderstorm that was supposed to hit us today has passed us right by. As we're getting into tomorrow too, look at that sunshine as we soar into the 20s, high of 21 degrees for our Thursday. Now we could have a slight chance of showers on Thursday night, but by Friday, no more showers, mix of sun and cloud, 17 the high. 19 on a Saturday. As we get further into the weekend, we're just getting nicer and nicer temperatures. Look at that for Sunday, 24 with a mix of sun and cloud, up to 27 on Monday and 29 on Tuesday. So we're just going to keep on climbing from here on out. We just got Friday, that little dip in temperature there for Friday and Saturday as we get back into the teens. Average high for this time of year, 20 degrees. Average low 6. 33 was our high temperature back in 1966. And in 1964, we had our lowest, which was -1. Sun rose this morning at 5:34 a.m. and this evening we'll see our sunset at 9:23 p.m. So about 16 hours, almost 16 hours of daylight. Not too bad as we're getting closer to that longest day of the year. Over on the west coast tomorrow, 14 the high in Victoria. Chance of showers, windy in the Juan de Fuca Straits. Risk of a thunderstorm. Remember that low pressure system I was telling you about yesterday? That's going to hit Vancouver, up to 10 to 20 millimeters of rain. 22 the high in Edmonton and 20 in Calgary. Both of those cities a bit windy tomorrow. Wind gusts up to about 40 kilometers per hour. Lots of sunshine in the rest of the prairies. 19 degrees the high for Saskatoon. 16 in Regina. Both of these cities a little bit windy as well. We're looking at wind gusts up to 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. Winnipeg, a little bit windy there as well. 18 degrees the high in Toronto tomorrow. As we're seeing these temperatures drop, not so humid either compared to earlier in the week. 15 in Ottawa and 17 in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. The humidity is sticking around a little bit on parts of the East Coast, particularly in Fredericton, where the humidex will be 25. 21 is the temperature though, and they are looking at some showers. There are risk of thunderstorms happening in Halifax and Charlottetown, both of those cities sitting at 19 and 18 degrees. 15 in St. John's, Newfoundland, with chance of showers and winds there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
Beginning June 1st, it'll be a little tougher to get a mortgage. The minimum qualifying rate for both the insured and uninsured mortgage stress tests will be going up. To talk about this in more detail is Kim Verkervich, mortgage broker with the Mortgage Group here in Lethbridge. So Kim, how will this really impact first-time home buyers who can only afford a 5% down payment?
It's definitely going to reduce the type of property that they might be wanting to buy. So they're going to be looking at probably something that's going to be lower than what they normally would have been able to qualify for. So, for instance, if they were pre-qualified for $400,000, now that would reduce them to $382,400.
So how do you think the new stress test will really impact the housing market here in southwestern Alberta?
People are actually panicking right now to get, mortgage applications in right now before June 1st. So right now I'm quite swamped with new home buyers trying to get the applications in so they can get the old qualifying rate, which is currently 4.79%, because it will make a big impact on with their total debt service of when the rate changes to 5.25%. So some people just are squeaking by right now, and some people are okay. It doesn't affect them necessarily because it really does come down to how much total debt service you have.
Thanks so much, Kim. That was Kim Verkervich, mortgage broker with the Mortgage Group. And by the way, the higher stress test will not apply to a purchase you made before June the 1st. BMO Financial Group says recent changes to mortgage stress test rules may moderate the country's housing market. It says, however, the mortgage market may remain robust in Canada for the next little while. The prediction came as BMO reported its second quarter profit nearly doubled from a year earlier to $1.3 billion as its provision for credit losses plunged to $60 million. That was down from $1.1 billion in the same quarter last year when the pandemic brought the economy to a halt. Revenue for the quarter was up from $5.3 billion to $6.1 billion. A new report by Stats Canada shows the gender disparity in job losses due to the pandemic. It says women accounted for almost 54% of year-over-year employment losses from March of 2020 to February of this year. The analysis notes that service industries, which has a high percentage of female workers, was hardest hit during the pandemic. The report says 94% of the just over 207,000 jobs lost in April amid a spike in COVID-19 cases were in the services sector. German regulators have launched an investigation into Google's position in the market and how the company handles user data. The Federal Cartel Office says it started proceedings against Google entities in Germany, Ireland, and California. They are based on new provisions in German competition law that apply to large digital companies. Similar probes were launched into the activities of Facebook and Amazon in recent months. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 181 points on the day to finish at 19,745. The Dow was up 10 points to 34,323. The S&P 500 was up 7 points to 4196, and the Nasdaq was up 80 points to 13,738. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 14 cents to $66.21 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to $2.98 US. Gold was up 9 cents to $18.9676 US an ounce, and silver was even at $27.69 US an ounce. Wheat is at $330 per metric ton. Barley's at $335. The November futures for canola was $6.90, and corn is at $392 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 28 cents to $116.45. Feeder cattle were down 13 cents to $136.50, and lean hogs were up 3 cents to $115.28. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 82.50 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government announced details of its Open for Summer plan. Premier Jason Kenney says there are 3 stages, and depending if hospitalizations continue to trend downward and more Albertans are vaccinated, we should be fully reopened sometime in July. As of this Friday, places of worship can go back to 15% capacity. As of June the 1st, which is stage 1, all social gatherings can increase to 10 people. Outdoor patio dining can resume with a maximum of 4 per table. Outdoor recreational activities are permitted with up to 10 people. Retail can increase to 15% capacity. Personal and wellness services, including salons, can reopen by appointment only. Wedding ceremonies can have up to 10 people, and funerals up to 20. Not only did the Trudeau Liberals squash the idea of more Albertans getting vaccinated at the Montana border, but also at the Ontario-Michigan border. Political reporter Brian Lilley will explain why in just a moment. Our country has crossed a major threshold with more than half the population receiving 1 dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, when you look at just those who are eligible, it's more than 60% of those aged 12 and over. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Brian, we are still a long way off from having the entire country vaccinated, but what do the recent stats mean for our day-to-day living?
Well, what it means is that we're getting closer to maybe having a 2-dose summer instead of Justin Trudeau's promised 1-dose summer. And what does that mean in real terms? Well, it means that if you watch Phil Mickelson win the PGA Championship on the weekend, he's surrounded by people. If you watch, and you and I have chatted about this, Blue Jays baseball down in Tampa. I mean, Tampa Bay was playing the Blue Jays all weekend. I think they took the city bus to the game. The stadiums are that close. And they had people in the stands enjoying themselves. The Jays are off to play the Yankees for the next few days. The NHL playoffs happening in the US. They're having thousands of people in the stands. That is because they have vaccine doses, and between the number of people vaccinated, the number of people infected, they are able to say we've got at least a certain level of herd immunity and we can get back to day-to-day life. We have neither the high number of infections the US has had, nor the high number of vaccine doses. So, comparatively speaking, we kept our case counts lower. That's great. But we don't have the vaccine doses. That's bad. So, we're stuck with people still being vulnerable. We need to get the vaccine dosages up and get towards that herd immunity number so that we can get back to the things that we all miss about summer. The weather's getting warmer, Hal. We want to go out and be around our fellow human beings.
And hug our family members. That's so important right now. Show them how much we really love them. The extended family as well here. Now, Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who's been blasted for his vaccine rollout, says now that Ottawa will be ramping up second doses in June. Now, is that earlier than expected?
No, not really. And the reason that we're getting to second doses in June is that most provinces delayed second doses to try and get some level of protection for the population. Why? Because we didn't have enough doses. We didn't have what the US has, which is they've got more doses than they can hand out at any given time. They've always got tens of millions of doses on hand, ready to go, and they don't have the people taking it up at this point. They're starting to plateau. We've in fact passed them on the number of people getting first doses. So, we are sitting here with less than 5% of our total population being fully vaccinated. The Americans are getting close to half of the eligible population being fully vaccinated. That's why they're getting back to normal. Even if you look at the 4-month delay between doses, well, there's an awful lot of people coming up for their second doses now. So yeah, this is not something that they should be bragging about. They're still going with the same end date, which is by the end of September, every person that wants a vaccine will be able to get one by the end of September. That's a lot slower than our counterparts are going through their vaccine program.
Brian, an arm of the federal government here in Canada says we have received a cumulative 40 million doses by the end of June, but yet another arm is saying that's actually closer to 50 million. Who's right?
Well, you've got the political side and you've got the public health side. And so this became a story last week when Major General Brody, who took over from Brigadier General Brody, who took over from Major General Danny Fortin in leading the vaccine rollout program. In her first appearance, she said, we expect to get 40 million doses by the end of June. And a bunch of us sat up and went, well, wait a minute. You guys were saying 48 to 50 million by the end of June. It's in Hansard. You can find the video of Anita Anand standing up in the House of Commons saying this multiple times. And so there were no clear answers for a couple of days. And then it came out, what the Public Health Agency and General Brody is talking about are the confirmed deliveries. And what we're talking about is what we expect. Well, given how the vaccine rollout program is going, I'm not sure that we can go with what the government expects. Last week there was a big hype that Canada got a record 4.5 million doses. That's because they moved up the doses for this week. Doses are normally showing up on a Monday. Well, holiday Monday this week, Victoria Day. What'd they do? They shoved almost all the deliveries into last week and said, that's your allotment for the next 2 weeks. What happens if Moderna doesn't deliver? We will be down 8 to 10 million doses in a 1-month period. So that would delay that getting back to normal that we were just talking about, that so many people want to be able to go to the baseball game, to the rodeo, to the concert, to see their grandma, to do any of the things that we normally take for granted.
Brian, many Canadians were crossing the border not far from where we are here at Bridge City News at the Carway border crossing in Montana and getting their COVID-19 vaccine shots. The Blackfeet tribe in Montana had some extras and they were sharing with everyone, and not just those with the Blackfoot Confederacy here in Alberta. The mobile clinics have since been shut down. Why did the Trudeau government allow over 1,000 Canadians to cross the border? Then it appears that they had a change of heart?
So there was a lot going on. You had what happened at the Alberta-Montana crossing with the Blackfeet and local U.S. senator on the Montana side getting involved to say, yeah, he told the U.S. Border Services, let everyone through. And my understanding is you were only about 100 meters into U.S. territory. You got your vaccine. You waited 15 minutes. You drove back. What's wrong with that? That's a good thing. And we had, as one example, the mayor of Windsor, Ontario, just across the bridge from Detroit. It's even closer than where most of the people lining up at to go get the vaccine from the Blackfeet. It's closer. You've got a major city next to a major city, and they've got a huge surplus of supply. To give you an example, Ford Field in Detroit, they've got a mass vax clinic that can handle up to 7,000 people a day. They were hitting about 2,500 people a day. They said, bring your people over, we'll vaccinate them. Drew Dilkins, the mayor, asked and asked, local health officials asked, and they kept being told no. And that was around the time that Public Health Agency of Canada and Canada Border Services shut down all of these, except for the ones with, specific agreements like Manitoba going across for their truckers, and I think some teachers have been allowed to cross. Drew Dilkins, the mayor of Windsor, is incredibly upset. He offered to run city buses. City of Windsor buses are actually licensed to cross the border. In normal times, they do. There's a city bus you can get on in Windsor. It'll take you across the border, do a loop at Detroit, come back. He said, we'll take that bus to Ford Field in Detroit. We'll pay for a Canada Border Services agent to sit on the bus and make sure nobody runs off to Target. They still said no. And at every turn, they've said no and said anyone that crosses has to quarantine for 2 weeks. Well, that takes away the impetus. There's 75,000, and I hate to just use the Windsor-Detroit example, but I spent a lot of time on the phone with Mayor Dilkins. 75,000 surplus doses in Michigan that were offered to them. They asked for emergency authority to bring them over. It's a short drive. It's a few hundred meters across the bridge. They said no. The owner of the Ambassador Bridge, it's a privately owned bridge, said, you bring people over and you can do it in the parking lot of my duty free, which is closed right now because nobody can stop. And they haven't entered the U.S. and they can go back. Public Health Agency and Canada Border Services still said, no, they'll have to quarantine for 2 weeks. They're shutting down every opportunity at communities like this across the country. And the best that anyone can come up with is it would make the Trudeau government look bad if they had to start taking doses from the United States and getting Canadians vaccinated down there. It would expose the hole in his plans. He doesn't want that.
Brian, this week we learned of a man who was arrested for what police allegedly said he was threatening to kill all of the premiers in Canada. Now, the same man has spoken out against vaccines, lockdowns, and other public health measures. What else do we know about this anti-lockdown activist, Chris Sky?
Chris Sky, his real name is Chris Sakosha. He's from the Toronto area. His family is involved in building houses, major developers. He apparently has had a falling out with his family over his activism, and he's been speaking out against lockdown measures, against public health measures. And in some ways, you look at what he's saying, and he's saying everyone's essential. We should open up our businesses. And these are things that I agree with, that a lot of people agree with. But then you look at what else he's saying. And he's saying that making claims like vaccines are poison, no one should be taking them. He makes claims that this is all to bring about a vaccine passport so that we can have all of our rights taken away forever. That's claiming that that's the reason for a global pandemic is going a bit far. But the allegation is that Chris Sky or Chris Sakosha made a call on or around May 12th, 2021 to a guy he'd been doing business with named Rob Carbone, guy who heads up a fledgling new party called the Republican Party of Canada. Carbone told police that he threatened to kill Doug Ford, to shoot him in the head, and to kill Carbone as well and every premier in Canada. Now, I spoke to Chris Sky the other day. He was driving from Vancouver to Kelowna. He's going to be stopping in Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and elsewhere with his book tour. And he said, yeah, I was charged, but all of this is hearsay. None of it's true. I'll win in court. He admitted to me that he has a large firearms collection, that was all seized by police, but he said he thinks he'll get them all back. None of this has been tested in court, but it really doesn't help the people who want to end lockdowns, that want to remove measures for these sorts of things to be going on, and then for the guy who's facing the charges just to say, well, it's just a big conspiracy against me.
Wow.
That doesn't help anybody.
Brian, last year, the idea that the COVID-19 virus came from a lab was laughed at as a conspiracy theory, but now that talk is back. Let me ask you, what changed?
If I wanted to be flip, I would just say Donald Trump's no longer president. But it's probably a bit more than that. This idea that the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is behind COVID-19, that it leaked out of a lab was something that was being talked about in mainstream media, by scientists, by all kinds of people in early 2020. So from January until around March, early April. And then Donald Trump started talking about it and saying, you know, I read this story, I heard about this. And suddenly, all these people turned around and said, that's a conspiracy theory, that's crazy. Now, this isn't to say, as some have claimed, that China released COVID-19 as a bioweapon. This is to say that the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that it may have been an accidental leak. Now, as I've written in the Toronto Sun several times, Dr. Theresa Tam, our current Chief Medical Officer of Health for the entire country, spoke to a Commons committee back in 2009 about how SARS had leaked out of a lab in Beijing and then spread around the world. These are not unusual incidents. There are cables from 2018, January 2018, when American officials went to visit the Wuhan Institute of Virology and said, they're doing some important work here, and everyone agrees that you should be working with China for looking at these sorts of diseases because everyone thinks they're going to originate there for various reasons. So we should be working with them to try and find cures. But in 2018, they were saying that it's just not secure enough. They have too many problems. We've got to actually give them money to make them better or something's bad is going to happen. Well, now a lot of scientists who were denouncing this a year ago are turning around and saying, maybe this isn't such a far-fetched idea. When I was writing about it last year, I was called a nut job and a conspiracy theorist. Turns out, yeah, there is some truth to this. It's at least worth investigating, Hal, to find out where the truth lies for the origin of this virus.
We only have a couple of moments left here, Brian, but I want to talk to you about Bill C-10. The fight over C-10 continues. You recently wrote that we should not feel too comfortable with the CRTC deciding how to deal with free speech online because they're cozy and too cozy with dictators. How so?
Well, the CRTC is the organization that decides who gets a broadcast license for TV or for radio. So they get to decide if you get a license. And, you know, if you say something that annoys them tonight, they may not turn around and say tomorrow, well, Hal, you and your whole station's off the air. But it might come up at a license renewal. Well, they're very tough at times on Canadian broadcasters. And yet there are at least 2 Chinese-based broadcasters who have aired forced confessions of Chinese nationals and foreign nationals, including Canadians. They've broadcast them, and those forced confessions have been broadcast in Canada because they are carried by Canadian carriers. There's RT, which used to be called Russia Today. It's Vladimir Putin's propaganda channel. These things are allowed to be broadcast. They are given free rein. They're not, you know, hemmed in the way that Canadian broadcasters are. And now we're going to be told, don't worry, hand over your free speech to the CRTC, and they'll look after it. They'll decide what's good and what's not. I'm not sure that we want to do that with an organization that's so cozy with dictatorial regimes like China and Russia.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
If you've ever been seriously ill, you're likely thankful for antibiotics. However, they can have side effects, and we're seeing more and more antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which has researchers busy trying to find some solutions. Joining me is Dr. Sophie KERNEIS, a microbiology researcher at Lethbridge College. Prior to moving to Lethbridge, she was a tenured research scientist at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, where she developed a unique experimental model of a cell in the intestinal tract. Her published work is used all around the world, and we're so happy to have her with us today. Dr. KERNEIS, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. So first of all, can you explain what antibiotics are and how they're typically produced?
Okay, so antibiotics are molecules, drugs, like penicillin, for example, that are used to treat some bacterial infection. So it's something that is very important because if you have an infection due to a virus, for example, you will not take an antibiotic. These molecules are produced by bacteria and fungi. And so probably you have heard about penicillin produced by fungi or tetracycline. So this is what we have today on the market. Huh?
So can you tell us why we're seeing an increase in antibiotic-resistant bacteria? Why is this such a problem?
It's a big problem. And so I know that today we have a pandemic due to this coronaviruses, but the World Health Organization is basically pushing and to do something to avoid having another big issue with this antibiotic resistant crisis. And so the antibiotic resistant bacteria, first, they were always present on Earth. Even Alexander Fleming, who discovered the first antibiotic, the penicillin, was able to see them and to see this problem, but it was very, very mild. This antibiotic-resistant bacteria are bacteria that are not killed anymore by the antibiotics, and it's because they have mutations. But the thing that we have today is that because we have used antibiotics since 1940, so a long time, we have selected antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and we have more and more. If we use more antibiotics, you will select more antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And this bacteria, I need to add two more things. One, they divide very quickly. So for E. coli, it will be 20 minutes. So imagine that. And the other thing is that they have a very big, high plasticity, genetic plasticity. So they can exchange genes basically between each other. So if you have one bacteria that is resistant, it can go to another kind and another kind. So it's why we have now today with this big crisis due to this antibiotic resistant bacteria.
That is fascinating stuff for sure.
Yeah.
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 Now, for the last number of years, you've been leading a project at Lethbridge College called the Antibiotics Alberta Plant Project, which is focused on studying plants native to Alberta to see if they can be used to produce new antibiotics, right? So what specific types of plants are you looking at or looking for?
Well, I would say, all the plants that we have here could be interesting. And the reason for that is that, as I said before, the antibiotics that we have on the market are only produced by bacteria and fungi. And everyone knows that plants have been used in a traditional way here by the First Nation people, but all over the planet, they were using the plants to treat, their disease, infection, or other disease. And so we took this approach of saying, okay, now we should take the plants and try to see if we could isolate some molecules, and that could be the next generation of antibiotics, because as we discussed before, antibiotic-resistant bacteria are a very, very big problem. And one of the solutions is to find more antibiotic, new ones, because it's kind of a run, the bacteria we will select more and more of these antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but if we have more and more new antibiotics, we can basically face these issues. So, yeah. So any plants could be a good candidate.
Definitely. So you were mentioning that they were used by Aboriginal people to treat sickness. So do we know for a fact if some of these plants were fairly effective?
So there are some reports and it's First Nation from here or from in Canada or around the world. So yes, absolutely, they were using some plants like clover to treat certain type of infection. So of course, before we had not this test to say, oh, we have an infection that is due to a staphylococcus or something like that. So But because wound, easy to see, it's for us, it's a bit easier than to say, okay, they have been using these plants to treat wounds. So we can suppose that this was because they were due by a bacterial infection or a fungal infection also. So we will basically, use this information and to guide a bit also our research.
Okay, so how can you determine whether or not a plant will be effective?
So we have some techniques that are now in the lab. They are well established in the lab. So we have been using these techniques since 2016. So when we started the project at the college in Lethbridge. And so in a very simple way, you need to put a bacteria in contact with a plant. And we have a way to find out if the bacteria is growing. It's by measuring the optical density, but it's okay. So we can put the bacteria and the plants together and follow that over a period of 18 hours, for example. And then we can see that certain plants are basically avoiding the bacteria to grow completely. So you will have the same kind of result as the one that we could get with a known antibiotic like kanamycin that we use as a positive control. So the technique is in place, and we have students helping us to do that.
That's incredible. So what kind of progress have you made so far? Have you found any molecules that could be used as antibiotics?
Yeah, we found some molecules. So this is also in collaboration with chemists. So we have a collaboration with Professor Raymond Anderson in UBC, who is helping us with this part of the project, because in science everyone has their specialty, and so the plants that are the most interesting for us are sent to UBC, and then they do the fractionation, and we were able to isolate some molecules from some interesting plants. So this is one of the contributions that we hope to get. So from all the plants that are tested positive for different bacteria, then we hope to get more and more molecules, with the hope that after we will have an antibiotic.
That's fascinating. Now, I understand that you've found a new phenotype introduced by plants. So what is it, and how can it be used for our health?
So this was observed more recently. So it was with students that are working in the lab. We observed that for certain plants, we see something that we call the clumping. Like an aggregate, like a big chunk of bacteria sticking together kind of around the plants. And so we have a student, Nadia, and who is from the University of Lethbridge. She's doing her own thesis with us, and she is very interested, and she wants to continue doing a master in the lab, so it will be great. And so we are studying this new phenotype, as it would be interesting for different applications, such as trying to remove bacteria in the water. The contamination in the water, for example, in feedlots, but also the water that we have in the river could be eventually more clean with plants that are clumping, the bacteria, maybe over application in cosmetics. So this would be some opening for the future.
Right. Now, we're, of course, in southern Alberta, which is, agriculture is a huge industry here. So can you tell us about some local plants that apparently contain phytobiotics, which can be used to naturally promote growth in certain farm animals?
Yeah, so this is another. So we have different direction in the lab, and one of the direction is the phytobiotics, because basically, to give a very quick definition, they are plant extracts that have some activities, and so we are looking always for antibiotic activities. So it's known that some plants like oregano or thyme are used to prevent the infection, and we want to basically bring some new phytobiotics from the plants that are growing in Alberta, but also the plants that are given to the animals. And the reason for that is that the farmers don't have access to antibiotics since 2018 to prevent the infection as they were doing before, which is causing quite of some issues because the antibiotics are helping them to prevent infection and also to promote the growth of the animals. So by finding, and we have many plant extracts that are active against, for example, Staphylococcus aureus, that is one of the bacteria that they want to control. We want to bring that to the farmers that they can continue to produce the food, the food animals, or to produce the proteins that we need for to feed us basically. Yeah? So this can be an interesting project to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Dr. Kerneis, your research also has the possibility of using plants to make natural preservatives for cosmetics. So which plants would be used for this, and what is it about them that would act as a preservative specifically for cosmetics?
So yeah, so cosmetics. So we are in collaboration with a small cosmetic company in Alberta, and so we are thinking and exchanging this problem that they have. Cosmetics is we put makeup and cream, and so we basically put your hands on the cream and put that on your face, and your hands are containing a lot of microbes. So basically it will contaminate the product that can have some effect on the life shelf of the product, and also can eventually cause some infections. So they are using preservatives in their products like paraben, but we want to try to find some more natural approach for that. So bringing the plants that we have found in the lab that contain some antibiotic activities to them, and putting that in their product. So we hope that in the very near future, we will be able to bring that and have a line of cosmetics containing some natural product coming from Alberta. So this could serve the cosmetic here, but after that, maybe a bit wider around the world.
Oh yeah, well, I would be all about that, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's what the people want, to go more natural, not having some chemicals that can cause some issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So any idea how long this process would take to find these, natural effective antibiotics? How long would that take?
Well, depending. If it is an antibiotic that, like penicillin, for example, just to give you an idea, for Alexander Fleming, it took him 12 years. Which was, the first thing was because, this was the starting point. So he had to convince people. But, and we see with coronaviruses, with the vaccine, it takes time to put a drug on the market because we want to make sure that it's really, really safe. So maybe it will take, normally it's about 10 years. But I think it's still very important that we start today to have some antibiotics in the near future. If it is phytobiotics for animals, I think it can take much less time. We hope to, feed the animals with this product, with these plants. And for the cosmetics also, maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 years, and we will have some plant extract for the livestock or for the cosmetics.
Yeah, that would be so interesting, especially if we can see it available at our local pharmacy. So even in terms of a plant-based antibiotic, any idea as to how long we can see that available at our local pharmacy?
I don't know, hopefully 10 years maybe, and we have to start, and this is the World Health Organization who is pushing to say, okay, we need to find new antibiotics, because the pharmaceutical industry basically quit a bit this topic because it's not very rewarding in terms of money. You develop an antibiotic, it's quite expensive, and then you will have antibiotic resistant bacteria coming up quite quickly. But still, we don't want to arrive to this situation where they say that if we don't do anything by 2050, we will have 10 million of people dying of this antibiotic resistant bacteria, which is huge. Today we have 700,000 worldwide, which is a lot, less than what we had for COVID, but we need to do something today.
Absolutely.
And so,
yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. Thank you so much for your expertise, Dr. Kerneis. Dr. Sophie Kerneis is a microbiology researcher at Lethbridge College. Thanks for joining us today.
thank you, Janet.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.